LinkedIn presents.
This is the Forbes Books Podcast, where we inspire you to achieve your dreams by sharing the stories of successful leaders and visionaries. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and this week I'm joined by a true builder and a visionary in the world of manufacturing and technology, Peter Mirabello, CEO and Chairman of Metal Finishing Technologies. With a passion for bringing out the best in people and an unwavering commitment to environmental stewardship, Peter has transformed MFT into a thriving industry leader, making it a critical link in the supply chain for the aerospace and defense industry. Peter's journey has been one of constant evolution, and you're about to hear about that. But truly what sets Peter apart is his unwavering commitment to his team, fostering a strong culture, and providing innovative solutions to the skills headwinds facing companies today. Peter, welcome to the podcast.
Joe, it's good to be here.
So one of the things I've read about you, Peter, is that your company makes metal perform better. What does that mean? Well, because as a guy, I see metal. It seems like it's supposed to do its job, but what do you do to make them better?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty scientific process, but if you have a piece of metal that's in a jet engine, say, and it needs to be able to resist heat because it gets very hot in there, we can put coatings on it, like a nickel-type coating, and it'll raise what temperature it'll withstand, and it gets metal to perform better. I think a more routine explanation would be, when I was kids, cars used to rust a lot. They don't rust anymore. That's a lot to do with the finishing they put on the surfaces, corrosion resistance, things like that.
Interesting. So that's how you make the metal better. Okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
Because I was always wondering, how do you make metal better? Because metal seems like it's a good thing. And you bought the company, I believe, in 2011. What brought you to metal finishings? What was it that attracted you?
I wanted to be closer to home at a time during the kids' lives. I had a really exciting career up to that point. It's still exciting, but I was doing a lot of traveling, and they were just at a formidable time in their lives, and I just felt it would be better to be at home. And I found this little platform and got in there, and after a little bit of work, found out it was actually pretty good.
Wow. And one of the things I heard about the company was it wasn't so good. It wasn't so good a lot when you... As they say, the numbers were a little upside down.
Upside down and hanging by a thread. But what I found out is the folks that ran it, it's 1947, so it's getting up into the 70s in terms of its age. But the folks that ran it from 1978 to 2003 lived well and had a great business, but they sort of timed out, and then that market hit. So when I got in there, it was certainly distressed, but I was pleased to find once I got in there and sort of blew some of the dust off and uncovered some of the things there was a pretty good platform that had operated well for a long time. And the market got a little bit favorable for us, and so we were able to take advantage of some things and put it back together. But it was in tough shape when we got there.
And I always feel like talking to entrepreneurs, you guys got to screw loose. Like the things you put yourself through to own and run a business, you knew that the company was, as you mentioned, distressed. Why go through with it, Peter? There must be easier things you could do in life. I'm sure to be closer to your family in Connecticut, you could have bought a McDonald's chain or something like that. What was it about this company?
Maybe it is a screw loose or the way that I'm wired. But it was also really just the driving force to be closer to the kids at a time. When you start talking about 2010 and 2011, we were right on the heels of that really big downturn in the economy in 2008, the Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, and everything like that. So to find something close to home, I just said, let me get something to operate, preferably own, and find a platform. And let me take a crack at making this work. I had some really good mentors in the previous steps in my career that gave me an idea of what I'd be walking into, realistically. So I went in with my eyes wide open, and it's worked out very, very well. But again, I don't know that I can vouch for buying it at the time. It certainly took 2 or 3 tries by the people selling it to get me interest, because I know I rejected them flat out of hand the first 2 times.
Wow. And you said it after a while, you dusted some things off. What were some of the first steps you took to basically bring something back, Frankenstein monster it, to bring it back to life? What were some of those initial steps you took?
To work in the industry that we do, especially on the parts that we work on, there's a lot of certifications necessary to handle sensitive materials and also have the authority to actually certify the parts once they're done. And I just saw the foundations for those things in place. And the more I studied the 2 previous owners, owners, really good business folks who lived very, very well in terms of being community members and family members, and had the ability to do some things that they wanted in their free time. And I realized that they just got cut short. One of them passed suddenly at a young age. So when I got in there, a lot of that foundation was there. It had just been neglected for 7 or 8 years. I think he passed in 2003, the market downturn in 2008. I got in 2011. So I didn't necessarily see it. The buyer doesn't always know what they're buying. But when I got in there, I found that I kind of felt like, okay, that's probably a pretty good thing that occurred. Somebody was looking out for me.
That's awesome. And one thing I've noticed when I speak to folks who maybe have like any kind of medical issues with their family, they end up becoming like pre-meds because they do so much research and they become like literally a doctor because they have to be an advocate for the loved one in their family. When you take this job over, how do you become an expert in this field? Or do you say like, I'm never going to be an expert in this field. I'm going to hire the right people. What was your frame of mind when you took over the company and knowing like you said, the buyer doesn't always know what they're getting, but how did you know what you needed to know?
In a serendipitous way, if you will, or just pure luck. Early in my career, I was a manufacturing engineer and I understood really how things are manufactured. And I happened to work for a big corporation, so I got to see really where the trends were heading. So one, I knew intuitively about how to build things, not necessarily with chemistry, but how to build them. And then number two, during the stint on, sort of the second act of my career at Berkshire Hathaway, they really taught me what it was going to take to run businesses. And so you understand there's a lot of facets to them. Certainly the technical is one, but there's technical people out there. And if you find them and you empower them, you encourage them, and you mentor them and some of the other ways of how a business works and how it makes money, they can do a heck of a job. But remember, that's just one piece of it, the engineering piece. Then there's, the actual culture of the company. There's the financial piece. There's the regulatory piece. There's the ability to deal with the banks and the treasury. And I think I had that training coming in from earlier parts in my career. So just to fill in the technical piece, not only wasn't that difficult, it actually kind of became an advantage for us because not a lot of people were doing it, and even few were doing it with an eye towards being sustained, for the next 20 or 30 years. So I think in the long run, maybe it was a little bit fortuitous that I wound up here.
And you also mentioned earlier that the market improved after you built the company up. What happened in the marketplace that all of a sudden metal finishings became like the place to be? Well,
fundamentally, metal finishing is critical to all manufacturing now, and it's not going away. I didn't know that at the time. A little bit closer to home, we have a big engine manufacturer in the state, Pratt & Whitney. It's a division of Raytheon. And I closed in 2011, and in 2014, they made a deal with the state to handle some tax credits and investment tax credits, and the way they were going to address those, in return for that ask, if you will, they committed to staying in the state through 2029, which I thought was outstanding. Wow. Concurrently with that, through their leadership at the time, they won the next generation motor for the fighter engine for the F-135, and they came up with the next generation single aisle motor that goes on the Airbus A320. All that happened concurrently. Wow. I did not see that coming when I was doing my homework. And I kind of felt like somebody laid a golden egg in the backyard. So, for all the adversity you get when you get into a small company that's struggling, to get some good news was certainly welcome. And that was impactful news.
Wow. I mean, the old adage, timing is everything. Who knows? You probably would never been able to buy this company if that act happened 10 years earlier, right?
Yeah, a lot of things needed to happen, including the demise of the founders of the business. Who, by the way, I found their widows a few years ago, and we brought them in, and we had a luncheon for them and introduced ourselves and told them we took the legacy of this company very, very seriously, wow. And we wanted to perpetuate, and I think that was touching. But certainly, if that hadn't happened to them, or maybe if this had occurred a couple years earlier, you're probably right. Timing was everything.
Wow. You mentioned aviation. Just give me a little thumbnail. Who else does Metal Finishings work with? What other kind of companies? Because I see metal. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. It is. You touched 20 things that were finished before you left your home. So we like aerospace and defense, and we like the overhaul and repair side. So that leads us into the Pratt & Whitneys of the world, the General Electrics of the world, the Rolls-Royces of the world. We also have Lockheed Martin in our state, which is Sikorsky. So that would be one. And then if we get outside of just the commercial and military, then you have a private jet world, right? So there's three different corridors right there in aviation with tremendous amounts of demand, and the demand to overhaul parts is only growing because it costs less demand on the environment, greater on turn times. If we get outside of that sphere, medical industry is enormous for this. Automotive's enormous for this. It's going to play an integral role going forward in drones and electric cars and EV batteries. It plays a huge role in electronics, right? It's the most necessary niche manufacturer that you've never heard of.
That's amazing. So you're mostly dealing with small, scrappy startups, it sounds like, right? It's all these little tiny...
Yeah, they think we're this big company. But I think my background coming, from United Technologies and Berkshire Hathaway, I brought a certain perspective about, what it took and what they were looking for to really become a trusted vendor to them. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of certification, and it takes the commitment of so many dedicated professionals and leadership that we have at MFT. So they deserve the credit.
That's so cool. And you mentioned sustainability, so let's dig into that a little bit, because I think a lot of people, when they think about chemical treatments and metals, are like, what's this doing to our environment? What's this doing for sustainability, ESG, all of that? Where does your company fit with all that?
So I think that's a great question, Joe. And historically non-green industry, and I think everybody just sort of shrugged because it's expensive to maintain, and the requirements going forward for cybersecurity and things like that only add a larger burden. But we never looked at it that way. We said we're going to develop a really deliberate green story in a historically non-green industry, and it may be as simple as this. I just early on was really looking for levers on the income statement, those things that I could pull on to really start to drive some margin to the bottom line. And I kept seeing energy, water, gas, electricity. And I kept saying every dollar spent, some percentage of that goes to those three. And over time, we worked with the state. The state has been tremendous, and hopefully we can talk a little bit about the innovation and leadership and support from the state of Connecticut. But we decided to invest in these energies, right? And so to short circuit the conversation but still make it effective, my goal was, if I can lower for every dollar sold, some percentage goes to gas, water, and electricity. If I can invest in certain things where that number goes down, the trend line starting in the upper left-hand corner going to the lower right-hand corner, by design, you are becoming much more energy friendly because you're using less gas, less electricity, and less water to run your processes. So that would be the cornerstone right there, right? To start with your green story. And then you get into efficiencies, you get into the way you handle the materials. You certainly work very well at the air quality. We don't think there's any reason that this was one area of the industry we would work real hard to raise the bar, and hopefully everybody would follow, because if we do, everybody wins. But that's an idea of some real fundamental thinking early on. Just use less energy to produce the same products. If you do that by design, you're starting to build a green story.
Yeah, it's funny when I've talked to a lot of green tech companies, they're like, man, I'm not even getting into the climate change debate. I'm just going to say, here's our story. You're going to make money. You're going to save money using this green technology, and it seems like you've sort of taken the same tack. Whether whatever your opinion is on climate change and such, at the end of the day, it's all about making things better for your community and the business. It sounds like
you just want to be responsible stewards. You have a responsibility to your customers. You also have a responsibility to the people that work there and their families to make it a good, buoyant place to work that can have a positive impact on their life. But at the same time, you should take your commitment to the community as well and try. And look, the world's not perfect, but if you work at it, you make it important, you find people that embrace that same sort of culture, you can have an impact and something that, as importantly, the people that work there are pleased about.
That's awesome. And we're recording this as the governor of...
Wait a minute, we're recording this?
Yeah, we're recording this. Yeah, we are recording this. We're recording this at the time that Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, is at war with Disney. And you mentioned earlier about the fact that your state, Connecticut, has been so good to you, and obviously all these other things that have led to the building of metal finishings. What is it like having that support? Because we're seeing it from now, most lay people don't understand the relationship between state and commerce, but now we are seeing it play out in front of the world with what's going down in Florida. So not that I need you to weigh in on that, but I want you to talk about that relationship between business and the government. How has that helped you, and talk about those ties?
It's tremendous, because I think these are problems that can't be solved individually, and that means government or the private sector, and we've worked together. When I first got here, I try not to use too many names, but a gentleman named Ron, who runs the CCAT division now as a DECD, he was one of the first people that reached out to me and said, how can we help? And it was modest, but those were some things that were throwing us a lifeline as we turned around a business. Since then, we're on our second manufacturing czar in the state, which means there's a great deal of support. Paul Lavoie does a tremendous job, and I know he's really out there in front, really trying to spread the word. But then right on from the government's office on down, the governor's office and the government, they're really working to make manufacturing a viable career path, right? Because we all face these same headwinds for workforce challenges. So when you start to look at it like that, I just think Connecticut is innovative when it comes to these things. I think a lot of the leaders recognize we have Raytheon, General Dynamics, and Lockheed Martin in our state, and a lot of their companies underneath their umbrella. And then there's a whole bunch of manufacturers, hundreds of manufacturers, 115 of them, in fact, in something called the ACM, Aircraft Component Manufacturers, all employ folks to support this effort and this very technical effort. And I think it doesn't happen without the support of the government. We got more work to do, but I learned early that you're not on an island if you're in Connecticut, and this is what you're endeavoring to do.
Yeah, it seems like this symbiotic relationship helps both sides, obviously the business and the state. So when you're seeing something play out in Florida, does that, like, you're like, what's going on here? Why would you even think about going to war with, like, your number one? Like, can you imagine if all of a sudden the governor of Connecticut be like, hey, I don't like what Peter Mirabello is doing out there. I'm going to start cracking. To you, does this seem like so odd that that's going down there?
I think, I don't know if the word is odd. It's unfortunate that there's such a disagreement that at the moment that can't be bridged. I just don't know enough about it really to weigh in on it. It's there's so many things going on. What I do know, is the lane that I live in, and we work hard to be in a spirit of cooperation. Let me give you an idea of something we do that we feel like is collective and innovative. So to meet this workforce headwind, which is pretty dramatic, and everybody's seeing it, all industries all across the country, our industry is even compounded in this area. The challenge, in other words, is compounded because nobody's teaching it in the schools. You need labs and chemistries and certain certifications to do it. So we got together with 8 of our friendly competitors to start, and then 2 of our biggest suppliers. And we're going to band together and come up with our own sort of leadership center to train some folks and give some folks a pretty cool opportunity to start their career, not with some classroom necessarily, puzzles, but really some applied learning. There's so many great young folks in these different communities in and around Connecticut that really want to come in and have a career and provide some security for their family. And we think having the school, we can teach them a skill, a lifetime transferable skill with the goal to lead to family sustaining wages is a pretty good thing. So when I look at those, I guess I focus more on problems that I can have an impact on, versus any other debates going on, because there's plenty of those to choose from. And
it's funny that you mentioned that, because I remember I'm old enough to recall when they taught woodshop in high school, and some people had garages where you could do like a car stuff. That's pretty much gone away, right? And that's one of the reasons why you're facing these headwinds, because kids aren't even discovering any of these traits or any of these skills until maybe they've graduated high school, and then they're looking for a job, and then they have to start from the ground up, correct?
They got to start from the ground up. And I think, a lot of things went offshore for whatever reason. So there's a big gap in the workforce. People in their 50s or 60s, or they're just starting out. But there's so many good programs that the tide is starting to turn. People don't always see it. To me, it's pretty clear that some of these efforts to really get to kids and their parents, even high school and middle school levels, we got a great podcast. Ari Santiago in our state does it. It's called Made in America, right? So we have this whole platform to kind of talk about and try and get the message out there. These are really interesting and careers working on, have you ever been in the side of a Gulfstream 5 or looked at a next generation car? These are the things we work on. We think kids will get excited about. So, these are some of the efforts and to get the word out there and, solve that. But be rest assured, I can speak for what I see on a daily basis. It's already started, right? It's going to take some time to restock it. But let's face it, I tell some of the young folks that come in, very seldom can you come into a company at age 20 and not have your boss be 32 and his boss or their boss or her boss be 38 or 40 or 45. There's a big gap in there. So with the right training, you can move up fairly quickly. The other thing that's been really fun about building this company is we're able to tap into what I call my elders, the people at the end of their careers that wrote a lot of the specifications that didn't want to work full time, so they want to work just a little bit, and we can bring them in here, and they're great mentors. It's the elders that allow us to really bring the young folks up to speed. So
that's great.
So it's happening. It's going to take a little bit of time. It's necessary, but the return of manufacturing is a viable pillar to our economy and to our communities that's coming back. And for those folks that are interested in, I think it's going to be a long and good career they could have.
That's fantastic. And it's funny that you said that because you are seeing this shift where I think a few years ago you would see like a receptionist job and they'll say college degree required. I'm like, wait, what? What do you need a college degree to be a like? It makes no. We got into this sort of headspace where like everyone to be employed had to go to college or have some sort of degree, and I think people like yourself obviously realize that that's really not the case. Like there's a lot of jobs out there that don't require, but it's sort of this whole college industrial complex that has sort of worked its way down into the grassroots of this country, telling people like, hey, no matter what you do in life, you need this college degree, when you know as well as anyone, Peter, you don't.
No, I think first of all, it's shifted, and you have so much information on your phone that the classic education may come at you a different way. It's interesting. I just read a book called The 100-Year Life, right? And you're talking about folks that are born in the late 90s or early 2000s. They get over a 50% chance to live to 104. So you're going to have a long career, and you should continue to stay curious. I don't think your education ever ends. I think there'll be innovative ways to go about it, because maybe you do it in a different sequence or you do it as you go along here. But hopefully, it's really fundamentally on some good folks with good attitudes, and you can be part of a good culture, and you can learn and grow, and you don't have to do it all up front, I suppose.
That's awesome. And one thing I've noticed, you even said in our conversation, you talked about acts in your life. Like there's different, you've almost lived like your own storybook life where you've had a beginning, middle, end. Not that there's an end or anything, but talk to me about the next act, because it seems like I think you're currently in Act 3, right? So what does Act 4 look like for Peter Mirabello? I'm trying to figure that out right now, and that's why I read The 100-Year Life and a book called Transitions and things like that, because we've been lucky enough, myself and my partners and this leadership team we have at MFT, to get a really good company, but it's up and running. It needs a lot less of my time, so I've opened up some bandwidth, and I don't know that I'm wired to have lots of free bandwidth, so I still feel like there's an opportunity to be impactful on MFT, but maybe do some other things. So I have my eyes open to that, not the least of which is continuing to grow this platform. That's what Act 4 is. I find a thread in my career has been, you start as a manufacturing development engineer and you think about manufacturing theory. Then you get a chance to go work closely with Airbus in their battles with Boeing to try and sell the A320 versus the 737, and then get to be part of a Berkshire Hathaway company of private jets and what it takes to really put on that world-class kind of service. And then you get into the overhaul and repair and what I'm doing at MFT. There's a common thread there. You see the advent of technology and what's coming next. You see the need to refill these workforces. So there's a lot of opportunity to innovate, connect the dots and all these things with the return of manufacturing. My sense is it's probably somewhere in that sphere, but we're figuring it out. And right now, just looking to continue to make sure the transition at MFT goes well. But that's my sense, and as I sit here today, and that is definitely a fluid interpretation of this moment. And part of Act 4 includes the possibility of you writing a book. And one of the questions I always ask of authors is, why this book? Why now? And I know you're still in the process of it, but what do you hope people get out of reading a book?
Well, First, I'm flattered by any mention that I was approached in this realm. I've had a very interesting career. I've learned a lot. I've faced the challenges that everybody face throughout their careers. There's always a balance between home and work life. But I think as importantly, talking about those maybe to some young folks or folks that want to be entrepreneurs, some of the great mentoring that I got, and I wouldn't be here without the mentors I had, especially during my time at Berkshire, just incredible folks. And it's not to say I didn't meet incredible folks in Toulouse because I met some industry titans back then, and even early in my career, the folks that got me to go over to France. But, part of it would be to share those. And then the other part is say, look, if there's a situation where I have a very unique perspective because I come at it from the manufacturing, the big airlines, the private services, the military, the overhaul and repair, and we can see, you've got to figure out how to lever technology because it's coming. You got to figure out how to capture this next workforce. If there's some way to cull a message from that, I'm not adverse to it. If it's impactful and it doesn't really reflect on me, it's just carrying a message about where we're headed, because it is a great industry with great opportunities for people to really do a good job taking care of their families and living in the context of a very balanced life. And if it can help do any of that based on, my scars and wounds and occasional successes, then I would consider it.
Awesome. Well, just talking to you over the last 20 or so minutes, I feel like Act 4, it probably won't even be the last one for you. I have a feeling there's going to be an Act 5 or 6 because you seem like you're in constant motion. Like you're probably not one of these guys that just likes to lay by the beach for 8 hours at a time. Although you've lived near the beach, so you may like to spend some time there, but not 8 hours. So what is that about you? Is this just in your DNA? Is this how you were raised? What is sort of like the, I'm going to use one of these tired business cliches. What is the secret sauce of Peter Mirabello?
Not sure that I know what the secret sauce is. I know I come from a home where we had certain perspectives about what was seemingly important. I've got a brother who's made a career being an outstanding high school coach, and he's mentored so many young folks and had so much success. I feel like I've done that with business. And right now, I just remain curious about what's next. I think it's an incredibly exciting time. I think there's some great opportunity out there collectively as a whole, whether it's for businesses or even the competitiveness of the country. And those things inspire me. I'm not wired to necessarily be the day-to-day operator, but I like to see things, since I was young, figure out how they work, and maybe you can figure out how they operate a little bit better. So given the opportunity, I'd love to continue that.
Awesome. His name is Peter Mirabello, CEO and Chairman of Metal Finishing Technologies. Peter, thanks so much for the chat. Thanks for coming by the studio.
Joe, it was a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for the time today.
Awesome. And that'll do it for this episode of the Forbes Books Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to subscribe to automatically receive new episodes when they're dropped. And if you have a moment, a review would be greatly appreciated. It would help more amazing entrepreneurs like you find the show. Let's connect on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Joe Pardavila. And please don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.